My name's Marty, and I'm going to give a testimony of how God's come into my life and changed my life. I grew up in a pretty good household. Mum and Dad are still together. They've been married for over 60 years now. Went to good schools as a kid. Always well provided for in our family. But there was some stuff that sort of started to develop in me early that, looking back on it now, I didn't understand then, but I didn't fit in, didn't feel like I fit in a lot of the time. I had a lot of fear in my life. I remember having a recurring dream that instilled fear in my life, and other situations that instilled fear in my life. I probably didn't interpret and didn't receive the love that Mum and Dad were giving the way that they were intending to give it. I didn't really receive it. And I started to try and find my own way, I guess, to fulfill the things that were either not right inside or missing inside. I started to lie pretty early on and hide things from Mum and Dad. And developed that developed over the years into a deep rebellious attitude within myself, where I just eventually in my teens I sort of made a vow, I guess, that I didn't want to do anything that Mum and Dad wanted me to do. I just wanted to live life my own way. And when I was 14, 15, 16, started the regular things that people that go into addiction start doing, and that was smoking cigarettes. Started to have my first experiences with alcohol and smoking pot, and relationships with girls, wanting to sleep with girls. And around the mid-teens, I guess that's when I really blocked myself off from Mum and Dad and just sort of said, I'm going to go and do things my own way. And I did. By the time I was sort of towards the end of school, 17, 18, I'd moved out of home because I wasn't allowed to have my girlfriend sleep over, and I wanted her to sleep over. And I'd taken a liking to pot at that stage, smoking a lot of pot as often as I could, drinking every now and again at parties. And then I started on my working life. My first job out of school was working for a real estate agency in King's Cross in Sydney, and that's where I got introduced to the biggest destroyer in my life in terms of addiction, which has been gambling. And surprisingly enough, in King's Cross, you might think it would be drugs or other things, but it was gambling. My boss owned a couple of greyhounds, and he took me to the races one night, the dog track one night, and I found this thing that I fell in love with, which was addiction to gambling. But over the years, that really destroyed every aspect in my life. It just completely destroyed my life. I still had, taking drugs alongside and drinking, but addiction to gambling became a big part of my life. I remember early on in jobs that I had, I would book appointments and say I was out of the office and I'd be down at the TAB. I started living week to week, and often I'd get paid and my pay was gone very early in the week, and I'd have to borrow from family and friends and then try and pay back, and then I found I started not to be able to pay back. And the journey of addiction just got worse and worse in my life, affecting every aspect of my life. relationships with partners that I would lie to and hide things from and not be reliable to. That also applied to most of the members of my family. I would, try and manipulate them to get what I could. Friends also. And that, as I said, that process just got worse and worse. I somehow managed to, in a relationship, to meet a lady that I got married to around, I think it was around late 20s, and we had 2 children together. And I had a few periods around there that I was going okay, and then one day I got back into addiction, and it got out of control again, and she pretty much gave me an ultimatum that, did I want them, my wife and my children, or addiction, and I chose addiction. I said to her, I remember saying to her straight to the face, which I actually really struggled to forgive myself for, but I said to her straight to her face that I wanted to go and continue on my life of addiction and gambling in particular. And she left, and she didn't come back. And my life then spiraled further out of control, and that was a period in my life that I started to cross boundaries that I never thought I would cross in terms of committing crime. I ended up getting arrested and charged with 24 charges against my name, mostly fairly gutless stuff, mostly stuff that was not. It was towards easy targets, I guess. Getting phones and hocking them, breaking into neighbours' houses, breaking into friends' houses, things that I really was ashamed of doing. But the drive behind it, the addiction drive behind it, was so powerful. The pain that I was experiencing inside to try and cover up from all the things that hadn't gone wrong in my life, that I'd chosen to go down the path of, the losses of jobs, the loss of relationship, not being around my children, not being in close contact with my family, the pain inside of all that stuff was just, it was something that I just didn't want to feel at all, and I would do anything most days to try not to feel that. And I guess that's the point that things really got bad for me and came to a head. I sort of started to think within myself that I wasn't able to change. I'd tried many different things over the years to change, and I wasn't able to change, and this was my lot in life, and this was what I had to deal with, and I didn't want to live anymore. I came to that place that I actually didn't want to live anymore, and I remember lying in a bed over here in Perth. I'd come when my first wife and I separated. She moved over here, and I followed her over here so I could try and see my children, which just didn't work out. I only saw them, I think, twice in 4 weeks, but I fell into a really heavy place, and a really, a place of oppression, and I couldn't get out of bed, and I didn't believe in God, but I somehow sort of found myself praying or hoping that he would take my life, or something would happen that my life would end, but it didn't. And I managed to get back to Sydney, where my family were, and my mum and dad had been looking into rehabilitation places for me. Once again, they'd tried to help out, and I went into a Salvation Army rehab over in Sydney, and 2 weeks into that program, still feeling quite hopeless. I went to a church service with not that many people in it, and that's when I felt God really just spoke into my heart. Yep. And I distinctly remember that day. That's like it's 20 plus years ago now that God gave me this message, and it was a pretty simple message, but it was very powerful, because it was to me. And I remember the pastor saying, because most of the church service was guys in rehab, and I remember him saying, "You guys have tried to live life your own way. How about you give God a go in your life?" And that was my story, and it hadn't panned out for me. It hadn't worked when I took things into my own hands and lived life my own way. So I remember going up the front that day, and I opened my heart up to Jesus and asked him into my heart, and I know that he came into my heart that day. But I also know that I have been very, very stubborn towards him over the years. I've been very disobedient to a lot of the things that he's told me, and as a result of that, have had 6 or 7 different times that I've been in rehab up until coming into Shalom here over 5 years ago now. He during that period though, he's been very patient with me. He's been very merciful towards me, and he's eventually brought me to my knees, which is where I needed to get to surrender to him and allow him completely into my life, to completely run my life. And my life, particularly in the last 5 years, has changed dramatically. But yeah, the journey up until 5 years ago has been, very patchy. There's been times that I've followed God, then I've gone back into addiction. God blessed me with a beautiful Christian woman, 2005, 2006. So just 3 or 4 years after I'd opened my heart up to him, and I remember praying to him, God, I've picked partners in my life all my life, and I haven't done a very good job of it. If I lay this down, will you bring the right woman across my path? And he brought this woman across my path, and unfortunately she's been put through a lot of pain and suffering over the last 20 years, but God told her that we were going to get married when we met, and he must have known that she was going to be able to handle that and go through that and watch, because there's been a lot of stuff that would have hurt her over the years. But I ended up coming into Shalom in August 2019, and since that time I have not had one alcoholic drink. I have not touched any drugs. I have not had one bet. I have not watched pornography. I've not had any medication that I shouldn't have had, and I haven't smoked. So that is a miracle. That is 100% a miracle of God. But I've had to surrender some stuff that I've battled to surrender over the years. I had a big addiction to sport, which connected with gambling, and I've had to completely cut off sport, watching sport in my life, and I still wrestle with that even to this day. It's crazy how it's hard to let go of, but I know that that's what God wants me to do, and in doing that, He has helped set me free of the addiction side of things. The relationship that I have with my wife, we've worked hard on that over the last 5 years, and it's now based on truth and transparency and openness and honesty and integrity. And we can tell each other anything. I used to lie to her all the time. I used to hide stuff from her all the time. But our relationship is flourishing now. I feel like our intimate connection is far deeper than it has ever been. It actually, thinking about it, it wouldn't have even really existed with all the lies and stuff that I used to tell her. I have family in my life. It was my wife's birthday yesterday, and we had all the kids over. There is still some impacts from my journey that God, I'm trusting God to work through, but bit by bit I feel like He's restoring all the things that the enemy took away over the years. My life is quite simple today. It's not not a busy life at all. I don't need the ups, the highs that I used to need or thought that I needed. But yeah, my life is very, very simple today, and I'm so grateful that God found me. Yeah, that God reached out His hand and found me and saved me. And I'm looking forward to my life ahead. I'm a grandfather now. And looking forward to the life that He has for me. I work here at Shalom as a mentor and feel purpose in that. And I'm so grateful that I can serve the God that saved me and saved my life. Amen.